Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
Alex, we are at the regular season. I am very excited about that. It is time to get down to some games. And as always, to our listeners, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please subscribe to us on the socials. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, and Threads with the handle at N2EFantasy. Alex, what do we have on today's episode?
Today's episode is news around the league, and we are going to be covering a couple signings as well as notable injuries for you fantasy football players out there who want to know about possible players who will miss week one. So we will be covering all of those as well as some guys who are actually playing week one, is what it looks like, who have been injured in preseason. So let's go ahead and get started with the Patriots claiming Matt Corral from the Panthers waivers after waiving Bailey Zappi and Malik Cunningham. They, of course, stashed Bailey Zappi back on the practice squad. They may promote him week one just because he already knows the offense and Matt Corral doesn't. But, Jeff, how do you feel about former Panthers player Matt Corral coming to the Patriots?
So I think there was a lot of shocking moves here. I think the first shocking move was Carolina cutting him, and then the second one was the Patriots claiming him. But also them waiving Bailey Zappi, who proved to be a capable backup, actually starting a few games for the Patriots last year. And they do claim that Zappi and Corral are going to battle out for the backup role. But I do think going into week one, it is a lot more difficult than it sounds to just waive Corral, stash him on the practice squad, raise Zappi up to the main roster, I guess is the best way to put it, the active roster. So I do think for all intent and purposes, I think that Corral will be the backup week one. It was an interesting and unexpected move on my end.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting all around because Malik Cunningham looked pretty good in preseason. Bailey Zappi at one point was discussed that he could take over for Mac Jones and that they were dissatisfied with Mac Jones. So then being willing to cut both of those guys and then the Panthers giving up on a cheap backup for their rookie Bryce Young. I'm surprised that they waived him and didn't try to seek out a trade or anything like that. But it is interesting that the Patriots liked Matt Corral over Bailey Zappi and Malik Cunningham and were willing to lose those guys. It is pointed out to me that Bill O'Brien and Bill Belichick also have a really good relationship with Lane Kiffin, who was Matt Corral's coach in college. They also hired a former Panthers executive who did work on Matt Corral, and of course, the Patriots back office also did a lot of work on Matt Corral during the 2022 draft. So there are some links there, but it's interesting that they prefer Matt Corral over Malik Cunningham and Bailey Zappi. So that's something to potentially monitor.
Absolutely. And so that was three quarterbacks that were waived in this equation. Do you know if any of those quarterbacks waived back?
Uh, uh, I know that Bailey Zappi was apparently blindsided by it, so I don't think he did any waving.
He might have waved one specific finger, but we'll leave it at that.
Well, someone who did probably wave hello to their team is Vikings star tight end TJ Hawkinson, who agreed to a new deal, 4 years, up to 66 million with 29.2 guaranteed after holding in with an ear problem at practice. So it seemed like that was a successful strategy for him. Do you think he's worth the money? Is this a good move for the Vikings? What do you think?
So my first thought is the running backs actually have a little bit of a gripe here because you can't tell me that Hawkinson is more valuable to his team than Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor. So they do have a little bit of a gripe on that front. he can earn an extra 2.5 million in incentives, and it looks like the guarantee goes up to like 42 if he's injured. So this is like a really good, really solid deal for Hawkinson, who kind of wanted to get to be a top paid tight end on the market. And they didn't really give up much for Hawkinson last year when they traded with division rival Detroit, which really is surprising overall because Detroit really doesn't have that tight end right now. I know they have Sam Laporta, but this also fits the theme that we've discussed multiple times in the Cousins and Sons. So they just wanted to wrap up one of the Sons, but I do believe Jefferson will be the next son that is wrapped with a deal. Yeah, I think it's surprising, but I do think that he is a safety blanket and an outlet, especially without Thielen for Cousins.
I really like Hawkinson. I'm glad they locked him up. You got to remember that they traded a second and a third round pick for Hawkinson, and they did get two fourth rounds back in that deal. So not as much as they could have given up, but they still traded a pretty hefty price to get him. Whereas these other running backs, they're not going to get that kind of compensation, or their teams aren't going to get that kind of compensation back for trading them. So Hawkinson to me is more valued around the league that most teams pass more than they run, and you want to get as many good passing weapons as possible. Hawkinson, I think, is as a tight end is better than teams' third wide receivers, and maybe even better than some teams' second wide receivers. So I think the
For
deal is
sure.
justified. He can also block. He's a big target. So I think that it's justified, and the only way it's not is if they don't make the playoffs.
Absolutely, and only time will tell. And we do know that Cousins is on the last year of his deal, and we don't know what that means for his future.
Yep, there could be a new quarterback next year, or they could re-sign Cousins. That'll be interesting to follow. We've got two
Absolutely.
more tight ends to talk about here. George Kittle has been dealing with a groin issue, which seems like every year now, but he was spotted doing some sprinting on the sidelines. Maybe he'll be healthy for week one. I'm personally not counting on it. And to me, George Kittle's injury history is baked into his price, and you have to know he's probably going to miss a couple weeks during the regular season. So I'm not counting on him playing week one in the leagues that I have him. I have a backup tight end already on my rosters. So I'm going to start someone else week one, but I think he'll be back shortly. Jeff, what do you make of George Kittle and his groin?
I think your assessment is quite on point here. I think that it's best to have a backup tight end for a Kittle that has an injury history, and hopefully he can get healthy enough because I think that he could really provide some value to his fantasy owners quite quickly as soon as he's back.
Yep. To me, it's a little more concerning for this next guy, Travis Kelce, who has been a steady Eddie kind of guy who doesn't really miss a lot of time. He's all of a sudden he got a knee injury. There's some swelling. They did a test. He doesn't have an ACL injury, but they're going to put him out on the field Wednesday during practice, see if he can play. And there's a good chance he does not play the week one matchup Thursday night, or if he does, he might be limited. That to me is concerning, especially with his age now. We've always been wondering, when does he start to break down? He's been so good, so consistent these last several years. When does the breakdown happen? Is this the year?
Whew. So this is a tight end that most redraft leagues would not end up with a backup tight end in. And that is a problem going into week one, this matchup in a couple of days. So, what does that mean for this week and going forward? So, this week, I would assume that he is going to miss this week, or at least start getting a strategy together where he is going to miss this week. I think the one thing that benefits him out of this is that he does have 10 days to get ready for the week two matchup. So that should really help him and give him a good shot to be mostly healthy for week two. And I just feel like this right here, and I know you're chalking it up to him breaking down, but I do feel like one injury is just a freak accident. So unless they start to pile up, this is just a one off for me, and hopefully he can get healthy enough to contribute for fantasy teams this year.
It's just weird seeing him be injured at all. honestly, because he's been so
Iron
healthy and
Man.
I know. I don't necessarily think this is the year he like really breaks down, but it's concerning to see it start and that no one else in the offense is broken out yet. So without a Kelsey, we're going to if he doesn't play week one, we will see what the offense potentially looks like post Travis Kelsey. I don't think it's going to look very pretty opening night, even with a quarterback of Pat Mahomes' caliber.
They could always look out for a trade. I hear Mike Evans is looking for a new team since he can't come to a deal with the Tampa Bay Bucks on extending his contract. So you never know. He might end up being a Chief if this is more serious than we believe it is right now.
They had every opportunity to try to get Hopkins, and they didn't do it. So I don't think that they're going to trade compensation for Mike Evans. And I think Mike Evans is going to stay with Tampa, which is disheartening that he'll be stuck there. But he does have a Super Bowl ring, so that's
He
good.
does, but he's in the wasteland.
Yep. We can also talk about with Kansas City, Tony is looking like he's close to ready, and he may be back for the week one matchup. So maybe that helps mitigate the deficit if Travis Kelsey is out week one. So maybe Tony will get his chance to shine. Personally, I like other options like Sky Moore. More? Can I say that? But
So with Tony, I expect them to bring him back slowly. He did have surgery in the offseason, so I do expect him to be on a snap count or limited somewhat. And I don't know if this affects their plans at all, but I'm really hoping it doesn't because you don't really want to be a victim of circumstance and that the Chiefs have a shot to be a victim of circumstance here, putting way too much on Tony's plate early and potentially risking a setback with him. So I would like for them to see them take their time with him and kind of stick to the plan. But obviously, plans change when there are injuries and a need for the plans to change. So we'll see who breaks out, but they're going to have to depend on somebody if Kelsey does not play week one, who has still not been rolled out at present time.
and we can also talk about a couple wide receivers here. So another player who is as important to his team as Travis Kelsey is to the Chiefs is Cooper Cup. And he is having hamstring issues, just like Kittle in some ways. He seems to have soft tissue issues every season now. And it's gotten so bad that he had to go to Minnesota to seek one of the top specialists in the country. So that was to see if there's like a if there's actually something wrong with his hamstrings that cause it to get injured easier, or if there's ways to work around it or improve his health of his hamstring. But Cooper Cup may miss week one, which I think is a little bit upsetting for those of you who drafted him pretty high.
Yeah, my other thought with Cup is they do need to find a way to get him healthy because he's really their only shot to have any sort of success this year. Right now, they're rolling with Van Jefferson as their number one. And while I'm open to giving him a shot as their number one, I don't really have high hopes. It's because I saw what he was last year. And you also brought up another point, and maybe we just need to have a new segment on the show called Tissue Issues.
Yeah, or you need a tissue for your issue. Something like that. I am a big fan of Matt Harmon's reception perception, and he did a breakdown on Van Jefferson that he's actually a more successful route runner than people think he is. And I think that this could be a year that Van Jefferson breaks out, and no one's really talking about it. Van Jefferson's been going basically free in almost every draft. Usually he's still in the waiver wire after the draft is over with, and he's someone that I might want to pick up if he's available in my leagues. So I think that he could be a breakout. And I think that Cooper Cup, his continual issues is concerning. And even when he does come back, is he going to play a few snaps in a game and all of a sudden hurt his hamstring again and put up a goose egg for you? That to me is kind of concerning. The uncertainty of, is he going to put up 20 points? Is he going to put up zero? That's what you get with Cooper Cup.
Yeah, it's just when he does play, he is the highest scoring wide receiver out there. So those are the risks that we need to balance while drafting, and we don't know what the answers are ahead of time. So I still think that he is a top 3 round player, and he's still going in the top 3 rounds of all of my drafts. So I would still take him there, but just be prepared to be without him for a few weeks.
There's a little bit more positive news for wide receiver Terry McLaurin up in Washington. As those of you who have been following it know that a couple weeks ago he got turf toe. That's typically a 3 to 4 week kind of injury, but he is upgraded to day and hopeful to play for the season opener. I am not counting on him to play week one. I'm making arrangements to start someone else, either in the wide receiver spot or move a flex to wide receiver and try to put someone else in the flex for week one. I'm not counting on him to do it right away, but I think he will be back shortly, maybe as early as week two, in my opinion. But Jeff, I know that you have a couple shares of Terry McLaurin. How do you feel about this? Do you think he plays week one? What are your thoughts?
So I think he's going to be really close on week one. They're calling him day to day, which leads me to believe that he will definitely be back by week two. So I don't really let that hinder the price of players that I'm drafting if they're just going to be out 1 week. So I never really let it hinder the price of drafting him. But my bold take is that I do believe Dotson will be the number one wide receiver there by the end of the year. McLaurin will be able to be the number two in Washington with Sam Howell, who is hopefully a good quarterback, at least decent, which remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think that they'll be fine, at least on the offensive side. I don't necessarily think Washington's a team that's going to be playoff bound either way, but they should be improved on paper. Whether that means more actual wins, I don't know yet, but I think that they'll be okay without him week one, and I think he should be back week two, and that's Terry McLaurin.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. That's the day to day tag is a good thing for players right now.
Okay, so now we have a few running backs to talk about here, and let's start with the Dolphins. They placed Jeff Wilson on IR, so he'll at least miss 4 weeks, maybe more. But the good news is that rookie sensation Devon Achane is looking like he may be back in time to play week one. So they have Mostert and Achane look like they're going to be the backs that they're going to roll with that first week. So, Jeff, what do you make of this? Is this Achane's time to break out? Is this panic mode that Wilson's hurt? Does it even affect them? What do you think?
I don't know if he's going to break out right now. It's very early in the season. Mostert is healthy right now, and I think that there's always long term concerns for Mostert's health. But as long as Mostert is healthy, I do believe that McDaniel will use Mostert the most in the backfield. And then A Chain will be the change of pace back in the back that comes in when there is a need for Mostert to get a rest or if Mostert does get injured. As we are reminded every year by the announcers, Mostert was a track star, so he does have that track speed. So he has that ability to take any carry to the house. It's just always been his durability that's been a question. But I do see at some point this season A Chain getting a shot to really break out with the team and potentially take over the starting role because we don't know when Wilson is going to come back.
He has the same first name as you, Jeff. How could you forget it?
Jeffrey. He spells it wrong.
He spells it wrong.
Yeah, he
Okay.
spells it ERY.
Well, I think that Mostert is a solid running back, but not necessarily a good running back. Like he's someone you can plug in and it'll be fine. But A-Chain has that super freak athleticism as well, and I think that he has more juice in him at this point in their careers. But I don't necessarily know if he's fully ready to enter an NFL pro caliber offense yet. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll take over at some point, but I think that they'll ease him in, use him as a rotational guy. Obviously, when Jeff Wilson gets back, if he's healthy at some point, he'll mix in. And Salvin Ahmad will probably have a couple carries randomly when he comes back. Overall, I think that the Dolphins don't really plan on having a workhorse back, and any of these guys could have some flex appeal for you. So I think that you can potentially put these guys in your flex, or if you have to, if you're in a bad way at running back, you can probably start them as well.
Yeah, they don't have a bell cow unless they acquire Jonathan Taylor.
Which still may happen. Still may
Still
happen.
may.
And speaking of Jonathan Taylor, his former team has decided, or his current team, I guess. He's still there. He's still there. The Colts
For
have
now.
named Deion Jackson as the week one starter, but they are planning on doing a running back by committee, a full blown committee, and using the hot hand approach. So anyone who gets a little breakaway is going to get some run for them this year. What do you make of that? Is that a winning strategy over the first 4 weeks? Or do you think any of these guys can break out and take over Jonathan Taylor's spot? What do you think, Jeff?
So I do think one will break out, but your guess is as good as mine on who is going to break out. And then also your guess is as good as mine on what criteria that they'll be looking at for this breakout. So basically, it'll be interesting to see what is going to happen with Taylor because Taylor might be back before we decide who is going to be the quote unquote weekly starter. So just a whole bunch of interesting moving parts in that situation. Probably going to snag one of them, whether it's Moss or Jackson or Hall, and not start them. So that is kind of the plan.
Yep. It's not going to be pretty, in my opinion, but maybe one of these guys can surprise us. Okay, and we can move on to the NFC South here. And Kendry Miller, the rookie running back for the Saints, he is banged up. He's been dealing with all sorts of injuries this offseason, and now he also has a hamstring injury, which is seems to be a pattern with a lot of these guys we've been talking about. He is right now questionable. I think he's going to end up being closer to doubtful for week one. So he's someone to monitor that potentially he may not play, which if he doesn't would be very interesting because it would be Kamara's out on suspension. It would be Miller is out with an injury. So it would be Jamal Williams. And maybe they would use someone like Taysom Hill in the running back spot, which would be kind of weird. So I don't know if Miller is a guarantee to be out, but he is someone that you have to keep an eye on for week one, and it's probably going to be up into the wire. But Jeff, do you think he misses? What do you think about the Saints if they had to go without Miller week one? What do you think?
Whew, they're down to just Jamal Williams. Boy, I don't know what they would do to scrap off the waiver wire. Would they give Hunt a call back? What would that look like, I guess, for week one? So I guess they're hoping that Miller will be ready, but who knows if that is going to be the case or not. And then other than that, Jamal Williams would have to be a must start week one. Am I right on that?
Oh, absolutely. He would be the workhorse week one. I can't help but think that Taysom Hill would somehow also get out there in the running back spot though, which would be kind of hilarious in my opinion. But yes, you're right. Jamal Williams, you'd have to put him. He'd probably at minimum be an RB2, maybe even RB1 conversation for that week.
Absolutely.
Okay. So last item also in the NFC South, Cordarrelle Patterson, someone who we haven't heard much of this offseason, is dealing with a soft tissue injury as well. And he has been unable to practice to date. So he is looking likely to potentially miss week one with the Falcons. Not that they'll necessarily need him. They probably won't do that heavy of a passing offense. And they have two starting caliber running backs in Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. So may not miss him that much, may not rush him back, but he's someone who has been relevant in fantasy years in the recent past, and someone I thought was a deep roster stash in case he got some receiving work or if one of those guys got hurt. So that's something to note as well.
Absolutely. You know that I'm really down on Patterson this year, especially with the Bijan and Algier of it all. And I'm not sold on Ritter. He's a guy that I'm avoiding in drafts, but that's just from personal preference. And I do believe that he is older now. So I believe that he's run his course and he might be like a really good special teams contributor when he comes back from his injury. He's 32.
Now, is that performance related, Jeff, or is that because of the logo on that sweater right there, that hoodie?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both.
A little Panthers bias over there. I think when healthy, Cordero Patterson is a surprisingly useful weapon in the offense. I just don't know where that would be at this point in his career, especially with two running backs ahead of him. I think maybe he'll get used as a receiving option, maybe be put back at wide receiver because they're a little thin there outside Drake London. And I think he's good depth, but right now with his injury and him being so low on the totem pole right now, I don't think that he's someone you necessarily have to have on your team. He could be someone you could just monitor in the free agent pool, or if you have really, really deep rosters on a league somewhere, you can maybe stash him and just hope for an injury that paves the way for him.
Yep, that's going to be the only thing that you can see because I don't know how much of a passing offense they're going to be, and I don't know how many snaps in the backfield he can take away from Bijan and Algier without an injury. I am super pumped for Thursday this week because that means we are at football.
I'm excited. All right, guys, stay tuned for our next episode that will be over our updated season projections and standings. But for now, that's it. That's been another episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you all for downloading or listening to this episode. Please do not forget to like and subscribe. Please leave us a comment and share the show. Every little bit helps.
As always, you can find us with our handle at N2EFantasy on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, X, and Threads. Please give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football. Thank you again.
Bye, everybody.